Life has a way of presenting us with questions that seem impossible to answer. Moments when we stand at crossroads wondering which path leads to fulfillment, purpose, and genuine happiness. The journey toward understanding how to truly live, not merely exist, has captivated thinkers, philosophers, and everyday seekers throughout human history. James Wigmore's exploration into the science of living offers profound insights that bridge ancient wisdom with modern understanding, creating a roadmap for anyone yearning to transform their daily existence into something extraordinary. The fundamental premise that shapes this exploration rests on a simple yet revolutionary idea. Living is not something that happens to us. It's something we actively create through our choices, habits, and understanding of universal principles. Most people drift through their days responding to circumstances, reacting to events, allowing external forces to dictate the quality of their experience. This reactive approach to life creates a sense of powerlessness, frustration, and unfulfilled potential. The alternative, the path that leads to mastery over one's circumstances, requires understanding the deeper laws that govern human experience and consciously applying them. Consider for a moment the difference between two individuals facing similar challenges. One person encounters financial difficulty and spirals into despair, believing themselves cursed by fate, victimized by circumstances beyond their control. Another person faces the same financial challenge and views it as feedback, an opportunity to reassess their approach, learn new skills, and emerge stronger. The external circumstance remains identical, yet the internal experience and eventual outcome differ dramatically. This difference doesn't emerge from luck or privilege. It stems from understanding fundamental principles about how consciousness interacts with reality. The science of living begins with recognizing that we are not passive recipients of life, but active creators of our experience. This doesn't mean we control every external event. Natural disasters still occur, economies fluctuate, people make choices that affect us. However, we possess absolute sovereignty over how we interpret these events, what meaning we assign them, and how we respond. This sovereignty represents the foundation upon which all personal transformation builds. Human beings possess a remarkable yet often underutilized capacity, the ability to direct their attention consciously. Most people allow their attention to be captured by whatever stimulus presents itself most forcefully: the loudest voice, the most dramatic headline, the most immediate pleasure or pain. This surrendering of attention creates a scattered, reactive existence where peace and purpose remain perpetually elusive. The alternative requires developing what might be called attentional discipline, the practice of deliberately choosing where to focus mental energy regardless of external stimulation. When you observe your own mind throughout a typical day, you'll likely notice it behaves like an untrained puppy, jumping from thought to thought, chasing every distraction, rarely settling into sustained focus on anything meaningful. This mental restlessness isn't a personal failing, it's the default state of the untrained mind. Evolution shaped our brains to scan for threats and opportunities, not to maintain serene focus on abstract goals. Overcoming this biological inheritance requires conscious effort and practice, but the rewards of such effort transform every aspect of lived experience. The practice of directing attention begins simply. Choose an object of focus, your breath, a specific task, a meaningful goal, and whenever you notice your attention wandering, gently return it to your chosen focus. This sounds elementary, almost childishly simple, yet most people discover they cannot maintain such focus for even 60 seconds when they first attempt it. The mind rebels, produces urgent thoughts about forgotten tasks, generates fascinating daydreams, invents reasons why this practice isn't important right now. Persisting through this resistance builds a mental muscle that serves you in every life domain. As this capacity for directed attention strengthens, something remarkable happens. You begin noticing the space between stimulus and response, that brief moment where choice exists. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and instead of automatic anger, you observe the impulse to anger arising and choose whether to indulge it. Your boss delivers criticism, and rather than immediate defensiveness, you pause and consider whether the feedback contains useful information. This space, This gap between what happens and how you respond represents the arena of human freedom. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, observed that even in the most horrific circumstances imaginable, prisoners retained one ultimate freedom: the freedom to choose their attitude toward their circumstances. Some prisoners became bitter, cruel, and self-serving. Others maintained their humanity, shared their meager rations, offered comfort to fellow sufferers. The external circumstances remained uniformly terrible, but the internal experience varied based on choices made in that space between stimulus and response. If such freedom exists even in concentration camps, how much more available is it in our everyday lives? Understanding this fundamental freedom leads to the next principle. We become what we habitually think about. The thoughts we repeatedly entertain shape our perceptions, which shape our emotions, which drive our actions, which create our results. This isn't mystical thinking, it's observable psychology. Someone who habitually thinks people can't be trusted will interpret neutral actions as suspicious, will avoid vulnerability, will create relationships characterized by distance and caution, which will likely generate experiences that confirm their original belief. Someone who habitually thinks there's good in everyone will look for positive qualities, will extend trust more readily, will create warmer interactions, which typically evokes better behavior from others. These thought patterns function like mental software running in the background, filtering information, directing attention, shaping interpretation. Most people remain unaware of this software. They simply experience its output and assume they're perceiving objective reality. The science of living requires examining this software, identifying patterns that don't serve your goals, and consciously installing better programming. The process of reprogramming begins with observation. Spend several days simply noticing your habitual thoughts without trying to change them. You'll likely discover recurring themes, worries that replay in slightly different forms, self-criticisms that arise in response to various triggers, assumptions about how things work that you've never questioned. Write these patterns down. The act of externalizing them onto paper creates psychological distance, allowing you to examine them more objectively. Next, evaluate each pattern. Ask yourself, does this thought pattern serve my goals and values, or does it undermine them? Does this way of thinking energize me or drain me? Does it expand my possibilities or control? Be ruthlessly honest in this evaluation. Many people defend destructive thought patterns because they feel true or because releasing them feels dangerous. However, a thought pattern's familiarity doesn't make it accurate or useful. For patterns that don't serve you, create deliberate alternatives. If you habitually think I'm not good enough, consciously develop the alternative thought, I'm constantly growing and improving. Initially, this new thought will feel fake. Your mind will protest that you're lying to yourself. This resistance is normal. You're not claiming perfection. You're acknowledging a more complete truth. It's simultaneously true that you have limitations and that you're capable of growth. The question isn't which perspective is objectively correct. It's which perspective serves your development. Repeat your chosen alternative thoughts consistently, especially when the old pattern arises. This requires patience. Neuroscientists estimate that forming a new neural pathway requires roughly 66 days of consistent practice. During this period, the old pathway remains active, often dominating. Persist anyway. Each repetition strengthens the new pathway while weakening the old one. Eventually, the new pattern becomes automatic, running in the background and shaping your experience in supportive rather than destructive ways. Around the 10-minute mark in this exploration, it's worth pausing to acknowledge something important. If these ideas resonate with you, if you're finding value in this understanding of how to consciously create your life experience, please consider liking and subscribing to Audiobook Library. Your support helps the channel grow and allows us to continue sharing transformative content with people who are committed to living consciously and purposefully. These simple actions make a genuine difference. The transformation of thought patterns naturally leads to the transformation of emotional experience. Emotions aren't random events that happen to us. They're generated by our interpretation of circumstances. The same event, receiving critical feedback at work, might generate shame in one person, curiosity in another, and determination in a third. The feedback itself doesn't contain these emotions. They arise from how each person interprets and processes the information. Many people believe emotions are beyond their control, that they simply happen in response to external triggers. This belief itself becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you believe emotions control you, you don't develop the capacity to influence them. However, when you understand that emotions emerge from thought patterns and interpretations, you can develop emotional intelligence and regulation skills. Emotional intelligence begins with the ability to name what you're feeling with precision. Most people have surprisingly limited emotional vocabularies. They feel good, bad, stressed, or fine. This lack of precision makes emotional regulation difficult because you cannot work skillfully with something you cannot identify clearly. Expanding your emotional vocabulary, learning to distinguish between frustration and disappointment, between anxiety and excitement, between contentment and resignation, provides the foundation for emotional mastery. Once you can identify emotions precisely, the next step involves investigating their origins. When you feel anxious, pause and ask, what thought or belief is generating this anxiety? Often you'll discover a story you're telling yourself about the future, a prediction of negative outcomes, a belief about your inadequacy to handle challenges. The anxiety itself isn't the problem. It's a messenger alerting you to an underlying thought pattern that needs examination. This investigation reveals something liberating. Most of our emotional suffering stems not from actual present circumstances, but from mental stories about the past or future. You're not actually being rejected right now. You're remembering past rejection and projecting it onto a current situation. You're not actually failing right now. You're imagining a future failure and experiencing it as if it's already happening. When you recognize this pattern, you reclaim enormous power. The present moment, when you're fully in it without mental time travel, rarely contains the suffering we experience. Right now, as you engage with these ideas, are you safe? Is there actual danger in this immediate moment? Usually the answer is no. The suffering exists in mental narratives about past or future, not in present reality. This recognition doesn't minimize genuine present challenges. It simply reveals that we add tremendous unnecessary suffering by dwelling in temporal realms beyond the now. Learning to return attention to the present moment becomes a foundational practice in the science of living. This doesn't mean ignoring past lessons or future planning. Both have important places. However, it means not dwelling in past regrets or future anxieties when such dwelling serves no practical purpose. When you notice yourself ruminating about what you should have said in yesterday's conversation or worrying about next month's presentation, gently ask, is this thinking helping me take useful action, or is it just creating suffering? If it's merely creating suffering, return your attention to what's actually happening now. The power of present moment awareness extends beyond emotional regulation. It dramatically enhances the quality of every experience. When you eat while fully present, food tastes richer and more satisfying. When you converse while fully present, connections deepen and communication improves. When you work while fully present, productivity and creativity increase. Presence transforms ordinary experiences into sources of satisfaction and meaning. Many people resist presence practices because they associate them with passivity or resignation. They worry that accepting the present moment means abandoning goals and ambitions. This misunderstands the practice entirely. Accepting the present moment means acknowledging what is without unnecessary resistance or denial. From that foundation of clarity, you can take effective action toward what you want to create. Resistance to present reality doesn't change it. It simply adds suffering and clouds judgment. Acceptance creates clarity from which wise action emerges. The principle of acceptance paired with intention creates a powerful framework for change. You accept where you are, fully acknowledging current reality without judgment or denial. Simultaneously, you maintain clear intention about where you want to go, what you want to create, who you want to become. These aren't contradictory, they're complementary. Acceptance without intention breeds complacency. Intention without acceptance breeds frustration and denial. Together, They create grounded, effective progress. Consider someone wanting to improve their physical health. Denial-based approaches look like this. I'm not really that unhealthy, I'm just a little out of shape, it's not a big deal. This denial prevents taking action because it minimizes the problem. Resistance-based approaches look like this. I hate my body, I'm disgusted with myself, I've let myself go completely. This resistance creates shame and emotional pain that often leads to self-destructive behavior rather than positive change. The acceptance plus intention approach looks like this. Right now, I'm carrying excess weight and my fitness level is low. I accept this as current reality without judgment. I also hold the clear intention to improve my health through consistent action. This approach creates motivation without shame, clarity without denial. This same framework applies to every area of life: relationships, career, finances, personal development. The combination of radical acceptance of what is plus clear intention about what you're creating generates powerful, sustainable progress. It eliminates the energy drain of fighting reality while maintaining the forward momentum of purposeful action. Purpose itself deserves deep examination in the science of living. Many people search for their purpose as if it's a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered, something external to themselves that will suddenly reveal itself and make everything clear. This search typically leads to frustration and a sense of purposelessness. Purpose isn't found, it's created through the alignment of your unique capacities with the needs you observe in the world around you. Every person possesses a unique combination of talents, interests, values, and experiences. This combination isn't random, it equips you to make specific contributions that others cannot make in quite the same way. Your purpose emerges when you ask, given who I am, what I care about, and what I can do, how can I serve something larger than myself? This question shifts purpose from a mystery to be solved to a creative act to be undertaken. The emphasis on service proves crucial. Purpose isn't primarily about self-fulfillment, though fulfillment typically accompanies purpose. Purpose centers on contribution, on using your gifts to improve the lives of others or to advance something you value. When people search for purpose by asking, what will make me happy, they typically remain stuck. When they ask, how can I be useful, purpose often becomes clear. A young woman might discover she has natural empathy, communication skills, and an interest in mental health. Her purpose isn't predetermined. She could express these qualities in numerous ways. As a therapist, a support group facilitator, a mental health advocate, a writer on psychological topics, a teacher educating others about emotional intelligence. The specific expression matters less than the underlying alignment between her capacities and a need she addresses. When she commits to one expression and pursues it with dedication, her life gains coherence and meaning. Purpose evolves over time as you grow and circumstances change. This evolution isn't failure, it's natural development. The mother whose purpose centered on raising children consciously will need to discover new purpose expressions when children become independent. The executive whose purpose involved building a company may need to reimagine purpose after selling that company. Rather than lamenting these transitions, embrace them as opportunities to evolve your contribution. Living with purpose requires distinguishing between goals and values. Goals are specific achievements you pursue: earning a degree, buying a house, building a business, creating a work of art. Values are qualities you embody and ways of being you commit to: integrity, compassion, excellence, growth. Goals are important. They provide direction and motivation. However, values provide the foundation that makes the journey toward goals meaningful. Many people organize their lives entirely around goals, believing that achieving the right targets will bring lasting satisfaction. They think, when I get the promotion, then I'll be happy. When I find the right relationship, then I'll feel complete. When I accumulate enough money, then I'll feel secure. This goal-focused approach creates a perpetual sense of inadequacy because happiness remains perpetually deferred until the next achievement. Even when goals are reached, satisfaction proves fleeting, quickly replaced by new goals that promise the fulfillment that somehow eluded previous achievements. Values-based living offers an alternative. When your life aligns with your deepest values, Satisfaction exists in the present moment, regardless of whether specific goals have been achieved. Someone who values learning experiences, growth every day, they engage with new information or develop new skills. Someone who values meaningful connection experiences, fulfillment whenever they engage authentically with others. Someone who values creativity experiences satisfaction in the act of creating, independent of external recognition or commercial success. This doesn't mean abandoning goals. It means grounding goals in values so the journey toward achievement becomes inherently satisfying rather than merely a means to a future end. You don't exercise only to reach a fitness goal. You exercise because you value caring for your body. You don't build a business only to achieve financial targets. You build it because you value creating value for others. You don't learn only to earn credentials. You learn because you value growth and understanding. Relationships constitute perhaps the most important domain in the science of living because human beings are fundamentally social creatures. The quality of our relationships dramatically influences every measure of well-being: physical health, mental health, happiness, longevity, resilience. Yet many people invest less conscious effort in developing relationship skills than they invest in career skills, assuming that relationships should somehow just work naturally if the right people come together. Healthy relationships rest on several foundational principles that can be learned and practiced. The first involves taking responsibility for your own emotional state rather than making others responsible for your happiness. Many relationships operate on an unspoken contract. You're supposed to make me happy, and I'm supposed to make you happy. When either party fails to deliver happiness, resentment builds. This dynamic creates relationships characterized by manipulation, disappointment, and codependency. The alternative involves each person taking full responsibility for their own emotional well-being while freely choosing to contribute to the other's happiness. This shifts the relationship from need-based to choice-based. You're not with someone because you need them to complete you. You're with them because you choose to share life with them. This subtle shift transforms relationship dynamics from scarcity and fear to abundance and freedom. Another crucial relationship principle involves communicating directly and vulnerably rather than indirectly and defensively. Many people communicate in ways designed to protect themselves from rejection or criticism. They hint rather than stating clearly. They criticize rather than expressing vulnerability. They withdraw rather than addressing issues. These protective strategies, while understandable, prevent genuine intimacy. Vulnerable communication sounds like this. When you came home late without calling, I felt worried and then hurt, and I'm realizing that I have some fear about not being important to you. I'd like to talk about how we can both feel more connected. This communication expresses feelings, acknowledges underlying fears, and invites collaboration. It's vulnerable because it reveals inner experience rather than hiding behind accusations or defenses. Defensive communication sounds like this. You're so inconsiderate. You never think about anyone but yourself. I can't believe you didn't call again. This communication attacks, generalizes, and invites defensiveness in return. It protects the speaker from acknowledging their vulnerability while ensuring the conversation will likely escalate rather than resolve anything. Learning to communicate vulnerably requires courage because vulnerability involves risk. When you reveal your fears and needs, the other person might dismiss them, mock them, or use them against you. This risk keeps many people locked in defensive patterns. However, relationships deepen only through vulnerability. The alternative, playing it safe by never revealing your inner world, creates relationships that remain superficial and unsatisfying. Listening represents another crucial relationship skill that most people practice poorly. Genuine listening means focusing entirely on understanding the other person's experience rather than planning your response, defending yourself, or waiting for your turn to talk. Most conversations involve two people taking turns broadcasting rather than actually exchanging understanding. Each person waits impatiently for the other to finish so they can make their point. When you truly listen, something remarkable happens. The other person feels seen and valued, which typically reduces their defensiveness and increases their openness. Conflicts that seemed intractable often resolves simply because each party finally feels understood. You don't have to agree with someone to listen to them genuinely. You simply have to prioritize understanding their perspective over proving your own position correct. Practicing genuine listening requires noticing when your attention shifts from the other person to your own thoughts. In the middle of someone's sentence, you suddenly start composing your response, or you remember something you need to add, or you judge what they're saying. When you notice this happening, let go of your thoughts and return attention to them. This practice, like all the others, requires patience and repetition before it becomes natural. Forgiveness emerges as perhaps the most powerful relationship practice because resentment corrodes connection more thoroughly than almost any other factor. When someone hurts you and you hold on to resentment, you continue punishing yourself with repetitive thoughts about the offense long after the initial hurt has passed. The other person may have forgotten the incident entirely while you replay it daily, nursing your anger and hurt. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior or pretending hurt didn't occur. It means releasing the emotional charge around past events so they no longer control your present experience. It means acknowledging that people, including yourself, are imperfect and make mistakes. It means choosing freedom from resentment over the bitter satisfaction of feeling justified in your anger. The practice of forgiveness often begins by recognizing how much energy resentment consumes. Notice how thinking about past offenses affects your body, the tension, the elevated heart rate, the stress hormones flooding your system. Notice how resentment colors your perception of the present, making you interpret neutral actions as slights, making you defensive and guarded. The person who hurt you may be living freely, while your resentment keeps you imprisoned in the past. Forgiveness emerges from understanding that hurt people hurt people. The colleague who unfairly criticized you likely struggles with their own insecurities. The parent who failed to provide the love you needed was probably dealing with their own unresolved wounds. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it contextualizes it, making it less personal. When you recognize that their behavior reflected their internal struggles rather than your unworthiness, forgiveness becomes more accessible. Self-forgiveness proves equally important and often more difficult. Many people maintain harsh internal critics that continually prosecute them for past mistakes, poor decisions, missed opportunities. This self-punishment serves no useful purpose. It doesn't prevent future mistakes. It doesn't make amends to those harmed. It simply creates ongoing suffering. Learning to extend to yourself the same compassion you might offer a struggling friend transforms your relationship with yourself and, by extension, your capacity for happiness. The science of living necessarily addresses the relationship between material success and well-being. Many people organize their lives around accumulating money, status, possessions, and achievements, believing these externals will provide security and satisfaction. Research consistently reveals that beyond the point where basic needs are met, increased wealth produces diminishing returns in terms of happiness and well-being. Someone earning $30,000 annually will likely experience significantly improved well-being if their income increases to $60,000. Someone earning $300,000 who increases their income to $600,000 typically experiences minimal well-being improvement. This doesn't mean money is unimportant or that financial struggles don't create real stress. It simply means that beyond a certain threshold, the pursuit of ever greater wealth often comes at the cost of things that actually do create well-being. Meaningful relationships, engaging work, personal growth, contributing to purposes larger than oneself. Many people sacrifice these genuine well-being sources in pursuit of wealth that won't actually deliver the satisfaction they imagine. Status and achievement follow similar patterns. The prestige of holding an impressive title or the satisfaction of being recognized as successful feels good temporarily but doesn't create lasting well-being. The hedonic treadmill ensures that any achievement quickly becomes the new normal, requiring ever greater achievements to produce the same emotional boost. The person who worked desperately for a promotion experiences genuine satisfaction when they receive it, but within weeks or months, that satisfaction fades and they begin working desperately for the next promotion. This reality doesn't mean avoiding ambition or achievement. It means understanding that sustainable well-being comes from aligning your activities with your values and finding inherent satisfaction in the process rather than depending on external validation or achievement of specific targets. When your work itself engages you, when you find meaning in your contribution, when you're developing your capacities and serving others, satisfaction exists independent of whether you achieve conventional success markers. Many people resist this reality because they've invested years or decades pursuing externals, believing they would deliver lasting satisfaction. Acknowledging that this approach doesn't work requires admitting that much effort has been misdirected. This acknowledgement feels painful, sometimes provoking denial or defensive justification of the pursuit of externals. However, continuing to pursue a strategy that doesn't work simply because you've already invested heavily in it compounds the problem rather than solving it. The alternative requires courage, reassessing what actually matters to you, distinguishing between authentic desires and socially conditioned wants, and potentially changing direction, even if it means disappointing others' expectations or releasing status you've worked to achieve. This path typically involves a period of uncertainty and discomfort as you transition from external validation to internal alignment. However, the people who make this transition consistently report that the temporary discomfort proves worthwhile as they discover satisfaction that doesn't depend on constant achievement or others' approval. Health constitutes another foundational element in the science of living. The mind and body exist in constant bidirectional communication, each influencing the other continuously. Chronic stress damages physical health, contributing to cardiovascular disease, weakened immune function, digestive problems, and accelerated aging. Conversely, poor physical health affects mental well-being, making it harder to regulate emotions, maintain positive outlook, and handle challenges effectively. Many people treat their bodies as vehicles that should function without maintenance, becoming surprised and resentful when health problems emerge. They eat poorly, sleep insufficiently, avoid exercise, accumulate chronic stress, and then wonder why they don't feel well. The body, while remarkably resilient, has limits. Repeatedly exceeding those limits eventually produces consequences. The fundamentals of physical health aren't mysterious or complicated, though they're often ignored. Adequate sleep, 7 to 9 hours for most adults, allows the body to repair, consolidate memories, regulate hormones, and clear metabolic waste from the brain. Regular movement, ideally including both cardiovascular exercise and strength training, maintains physical capacity, regulates mood, improves cognitive function, and reduces disease risk. Nutrition emphasizing whole foods rather than processed products provides the nutrients necessary for optimal function while avoiding the excessive sugar, unhealthy fats, and chemical additives that contribute to inflammation and disease. Stress management represents perhaps the most overlooked health fundamental. Many people accept chronic stress as inevitable, a necessary cost of modern living. However, chronic stress literally damages physical structure and function. It keeps the nervous system in a state of perpetual activation, which interferes with digestion, sleep, immune function, and tissue repair. Learning to activate the relaxation response through practices like deep breathing, meditation, time in nature, or engaging in enjoyable activities isn't optional luxury, it's essential maintenance. The challenge involves prioritizing these fundamentals when they compete with other demands. It's always possible to justify skipping exercise because work demands your attention, sacrificing sleep to meet deadlines, eating convenience food because healthy cooking takes time. Each individual instance seems reasonable, but the accumulated effect of consistently deprioritizing health creates problems that eventually demand far more time and energy than prevention would have required. Treating health practices as non-negotiable rather than optional creates different results. You don't decide each morning whether to brush your teeth based on how busy you are. You simply do it because it's non-negotiable. Approaching exercise, adequate sleep, and reasonable nutrition as similarly non-negotiable transforms them from things you do when convenient to foundational practices that support everything else you want to accomplish. Many people discover that investing time in health practices actually increases their productive capacity rather than competing with it. Someone who exercises regularly typically has more energy, better focus, and greater stress resilience than someone who skips exercise to create more working hours. Someone who sleeps adequately makes fewer mistakes, solves problems more creatively, and maintains better judgment than someone who sacrifices sleep for extra work time. Health practices aren't time away from productive activity. They're investments that multiply the quality and effectiveness of all other activities. Gratitude represents another practice with disproportionate impact on well-being. The human brain evolved with a negativity bias, paying more attention to threats and problems than to positive circumstances. This bias served our ancestors well. The person who noticed potential dangers survived more often than the person who wandered about appreciating flowers. However, in modern life where immediate physical threats are relatively rare, this negativity bias often creates unnecessary suffering and blindness to available blessings. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean denying problems or pretending everything is perfect. It means consciously directing attention to what's working, what you appreciate, what brings you joy or satisfaction. This deliberate redirection counterbalances the automatic negativity bias, creating a more balanced and accurate perception of reality. When you regularly practice gratitude, you're not ignoring difficulties. You're ensuring they don't monopolize your attention and obscure everything else. The practice can take many forms. Some people maintain gratitude journals, writing 3 to 5 things they appreciate each day. Others establish gratitude practices around meals, pausing before eating to appreciate the food and all the people whose labor made it possible. Still others create bedtime practices, reviewing the day and identifying moments of connection, beauty, or satisfaction. The specific format matters less than the consistency of directing attention toward appreciation. Research on gratitude practices reveals remarkable benefits. People who regularly practice gratitude report higher life satisfaction, stronger relationships, better sleep, improved physical health, and greater resilience in facing challenges. These benefits don't require believing that everything happens for a reason or maintaining unrealistic positivity. They emerge simply from balancing attention between problems needing solving and blessings worth appreciating. Nearing the conclusion of this exploration, it's worth taking a moment to mention something. If you've found value in these ideas about conscious living, please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library. These simple actions truly help the channel grow and continue sharing content that supports people in living more deliberately and joyfully. Your engagement makes a genuine difference in allowing us to reach others who are seeking these insights. Legacy represents the final major theme in the science of living. Most people don't seriously consider their legacy until facing mortality directly, either through their own health crisis or the death of someone close. However, beginning to consider your legacy earlier creates clarifying focus that improves present choices and helps ensure that your time and energy align with what truly matters to you. Legacy isn't only for famous people whose names will be remembered by history. Your legacy consists of the impact you have on the people whose lives intersect with yours and the contributions you make to causes and communities you care about. A teacher's legacy lives in former students whose lives were shaped by their influence. A parent's legacy lives in children who carry forward values and patterns learned at home. A friend's legacy lives in people whose burdens were lightened by their companionship and support. When you consider what you want your legacy to be, you clarify what deserves your focus and energy. If you want to be remembered as someone who prioritized family, that awareness helps you choose family time over extra work hours when conflicts arise. If you want to be remembered for creative contributions, that awareness motivates consistent creative practice, even when it's difficult. If you want to be remembered for kindness and service, that awareness shapes how you interact with everyone from intimate partners to strangers in passing. Many people discover when they seriously consider their desired legacy that their current life doesn't align with it. They're spending time on activities that won't matter in retrospect, while neglecting what will actually prove significant. This discovery can feel uncomfortable, even painful, but it's also tremendously valuable because it creates opportunity for course correction. You cannot change the past, but you can absolutely influence what the next chapter of your life contains. The practice of considering your legacy also helps maintain perspective during difficult times. When you're struggling with a temporary challenge, remembering your larger purpose and intended legacy prevents the problem from consuming your entire focus. You can acknowledge that, yes, this conflict with a colleague is frustrating, but it's not the primary story of your life. Yes, this financial setback is challenging, but it doesn't define you. Maintaining connection to your larger purpose provides resilience and prevents temporary difficulties from derailing long-term direction. Creating a meaningful legacy doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic achievements. It emerges from consistent alignment between values and actions, from showing up with integrity and care in ordinary moments, from contributing where you can with what you have. The parent who listens patiently when their child needs to talk, the neighbor who checks on an elderly resident, the colleague who acknowledges others' contributions, the citizen who participates constructively in community life. All these people are building legacies of positive impact regardless of whether their names become publicly known. The science of living ultimately reveals that well-being and fulfillment aren't mysterious or dependent on circumstances aligning perfectly. They emerge from understanding and applying principles that shape human experience, directing attention consciously, aligning actions with values, taking responsibility for your internal state, practicing presence, nurturing relationships, maintaining physical health, choosing service over self-absorption, and living in ways that reflect your desired legacy. These principles aren't always easy to implement. They require sustained effort, patience with yourself when you fall short, and willingness to continually return to practices even when they feel difficult. However, they're accessible to everyone regardless of external circumstances, and their consistent application transforms the quality of lived experience more reliably than any external achievement or circumstance change. The person who integrates these principles discovers something remarkable. Life becomes increasingly satisfying, not because circumstances become perfect, but because they develop capacity to engage effectively with whatever arises. Challenges still occur, disappointments still happen, loss and grief remain part of human experience. However, these difficulties no longer devastate or define you. You develop resilience, perspective, and the capacity to find meaning and growth even in difficulty. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of thousands of small choices, daily practices, consistent application of principles over months and years. Some days you'll apply these ideas skillfully. Other days you'll forget everything and react unconsciously to circumstances. This inconsistency is normal and expected. Progress isn't linear. It involves advances and retreats, moments of clarity, and periods of confusion. What matters is the overall trajectory, the general direction you're moving across time. Many people give up on personal development practices because they expect dramatic, immediate transformation. When consistent practice produces gradual rather than sudden change, they conclude the practices don't work and abandon them. This expectation of immediate results reflects the instant gratification culture we've created. But meaningful change operates on different timelines. A person who commits to daily meditation for 3 months will likely notice significant changes in their reactivity, emotional regulation, and capacity for presence. Someone who meditates twice and decides it doesn't work will naturally experience no benefit. The same principle applies to all the practices discussed here. Trying conscious attention direction once won't transform your mental patterns. Attempting vulnerable communication once won't revolutionize your relationships. Practicing gratitude for a week won't rewire your negativity bias. However, sustained practice over time absolutely creates transformation. The person you become through consistent application of these principles will barely resemble the person you were when you started. This journey of personal development benefits from remembering that you're not trying to become perfect. You're not trying to transcend your humanity or eliminate all negative emotions or never make mistakes again. You're simply developing greater consciousness, a skill, and alignment between your values and actions. You'll still feel anger sometimes, still experience fear, still make choices you regret, still fail at things you attempt. The difference is that these experiences won't control you as completely, won't last as long, and will increasingly become sources of learning rather than sources of shame. Self-compassion proves essential throughout this journey. Many people approach personal development with harsh self-judgment, treating themselves like enemies to be conquered rather than friends to be supported. They berate themselves for every failure, compare themselves unfavorably to others, maintain impossibly high standards that ensure constant feelings of inadequacy. This approach not only creates unnecessary suffering, it actually impedes progress because shame and self-criticism activate threat responses that interfere with learning and growth. The alternative involves treating yourself as you might treat a beloved friend who's struggling. When a friend makes a mistake, you likely offer understanding and encouragement rather than harsh criticism. When a friend feels discouraged, you probably remind them of their strengths and past successes rather than cataloging their failures. Extending this same kindness to yourself creates the emotional safety within which genuine transformation becomes possible. This doesn't mean lowering standards or excusing destructive behavior. It means distinguishing between your actions, which can and should be evaluated and improved, and your fundamental worth as a person, which isn't contingent on performance. You can acknowledge that a specific behavior was unskillful while maintaining basic appreciation for yourself as someone doing their best with current understanding and capacity. Community and connection with others on similar journeys also supports sustainable development. Personal growth can feel lonely when you're surrounded by people who aren't interested in consciousness and intentional living. Finding others who share your commitment to growth creates accountability, encouragement, and the normalization of practices that mainstream culture often dismisses as unnecessary or weird. Whether through local groups, online communities, classes, or friendships, connecting with fellow travelers makes the journey more sustainable and enjoyable. The final element worth emphasizing involves beginning wherever you are with whatever capacity you currently possess. Many people delay starting personal development practices until conditions seem ideal, until they have more time, until they feel more motivated, until circumstances align more favorably. This delay tactic ensures they never begin because ideal conditions rarely materialize spontaneously. The circumstances you're waiting for typically emerge as results of the practices, not as prerequisites for starting them. You don't need to implement everything simultaneously. Choose one or two practices that resonate most strongly and commit to them for a specific period, perhaps 30 or 60 days. Notice what changes. Many people discover that one practice naturally leads to others. Someone who begins meditating often finds themselves naturally eating more consciously, or someone who starts exercising regularly notices improved emotional regulation that makes relationship practices easier. The journey of conscious living represents perhaps the most worthwhile investment you can make because it affects absolutely everything else in your experience. Career success becomes more satisfying when you're living according to your values. Relationships deepen when you're developing emotional intelligence and communication skills. Challenges become more manageable when you're developing resilience and perspective. Ordinary moments become richer when you're practicing presence and gratitude. James Wigmore's exploration of the science of living ultimately offers not a prescription for perfection, but a roadmap for continuous development and increasing alignment between who you are and who you want to become. The principles and practices outlined don't promise to eliminate all problems or create constant bliss. They promise something more valuable: the development of capacity to engage skillfully with life as it actually is while consciously creating experiences and contributions that matter to you. Every person has unique circumstances, challenges, strengths, and opportunities. The application of these universal principles necessarily takes individual forms. What works perfectly for one person might need adaptation for another. This reality requires bringing your own intelligence and experimentation to the process rather than simply following instructions mechanically. Notice what practices produce positive changes for you specifically. Double down on those. Release or modify practices that don't serve your development. The beauty of these principles lies in their accessibility and their independence from external circumstances. You don't need permission, resources, or perfect conditions to begin directing your attention more consciously. You don't need anyone's approval to start aligning your actions with your values. You don't need ideal circumstances to practice presence, gratitude, or self-compassion. These practices exist within your sovereign control, regardless of what's happening around you. As you move forward from this exploration, consider what one practice or principle you might commit to implementing consistently. Maybe it's establishing a morning routine that includes meditation or journaling. Maybe it's practicing vulnerable communication in one important relationship. Maybe it's conducting a values assessment and identifying where your current life doesn't align with what truly matters to you. Maybe it's simply beginning to notice the space between stimulus and response, that gap where choice and freedom exist. Whatever you choose, approach it with patience and self-compassion. Expect inconsistency and imperfection. View challenges as opportunities for learning rather than evidence of failure. Celebrate small wins rather than dismissing them because they're not dramatic transformations. Trust that consistent practice over time creates changes that seem impossible from your current vantage point. The life you desire, characterized by meaning, connection, purpose, and sustainable well-being, doesn't appear accidentally. It emerges from understanding principles about how consciousness interacts with experience and consistently applying those principles through practical action. The science of living isn't theoretical philosophy meant for contemplation alone. It's practical wisdom meant for daily application that transforms theory into lived reality. Your life represents your masterpiece, the one creation entirely within your control, the one contribution you alone can make. Whether you approach it with consciousness and intention or drift through responding to whatever arises makes all the difference between existing and truly living. The choice remains perpetually available, waiting in each present moment for you to claim it. Thank you for engaging with these ideas about conscious living and personal development. If you found value here, please check out other videos in our audiobook library where we explore additional perspectives and practices for living with greater awareness, purpose, and satisfaction. Your continued engagement supports our ability to share transformative content with people committed to growth and conscious evolution. The journey of becoming who you want to be starts now in this moment with whatever choice you make next.